Thanks for starting your week with us. Hello and welcome to Business Daily, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Lee Ji-yoon. It's a busy day in the world of business news today, so let's first get started with a look at the day's highlights. Korean shares plunge as tensions remain from a cross-border standoff between Seoul and Pyongyang, and markets across Asia nosedive. We take a closer look at how Korea and its biggest trading partner, China, continue to influence each other's economies as the two countries mark 23 years of diplomatic ties. Our top story on this Monday, global market instabilities are mixing in with the spike in tensions between the two Koreas, resulting in a highly volatile day of trading. And our Eunice Kim is following the developments for us. We connect to her now. Eunice, let's begin with currencies. The Korean won kicked off the work week down, crossing a psychologically important threshold this morning.
Yeah, that's right, Ji-yoon. It surpassed the 1,200 won mark soon after markets opened here in Seoul. It just barely recovered, trading at 1,199 won to the dollar when markets closed about an hour ago. That's yet another four-year low, raising more steeply the won's hike against the U.S. dollar that's been ongoing really since late April. Investors have already been offloading what they perceive to be risky assets, and it doesn't help that we have yet to hear of a breakthrough in those marathon high-level talks between South and North Korean representatives at the border, which, by the way, has now crossed into the third consecutive day.
And the Kospi and Kosdaq both ended down, shedding more than 2% each.
Yeah, that's right. The benchmark Kospi also kicked off the day with a fall for the sixth straight business day. It ended nearly 2.5% lower, and the tech-heavy Kosdaq nearly 2.2% lower, as you see there. But Korea has definitely not been an exception today. Traders were seeing red across the board in Asia's indices, with China leading the Asia market sell-off. At its noontime break, the Shanghai Composite had already plunged by 8.4%, erasing all of its gains for this year. This after the index had already marked an 11% loss last week.
And I hear that Korea's financial regulators are also closely monitoring the fast-moving developments.
Yeah, you bet. The central bank, the Ministry of Strategy and Finance, and the Financial Services Commission all keeping a close eye on those talks at the border, as well as overseas factors like China's weakening economy, falling commodities, and the U.S. Fed rate hike. And over the weekend, the Finance Ministry said it is open to preemptive motion should market instabilities worsen. This has been Eunice Kim for Business Daily.
On top of that, Korea's largest exchange-traded fund, or ETF, has seen the biggest weekly withdrawal since it was introduced in the year 2000. Bloomberg said that traders pulled out roughly $195.4 million last week from iShares MSCI South Korea capped ETF, the largest ETF tracking the country's stocks. The fund has around $3.1 billion in assets, with top holdings in Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motor. Now, experts say investors were concerned about tensions on the Korean peninsula after the two sides exchanged artillery fire along the border last Thursday, coupled with the slowdown in China. Meanwhile, Seoul and Pyongyang kicked off talks at the border town of Panmunjom on Saturday to ease tensions. Commodities sank to the lowest level since 1999 on the back of a general supply glut from excessive investment over the years and slow growth in China, the largest user of energy, grains, and metals. According to the Bloomberg Commodity Index, which tracks the price of 22 raw materials, Brent crude, a major benchmark for the price of oil, fell below $45 a barrel for the first time since 2009. Experts say consumer sentiment is extremely negative across the commodity complex as markets have been plagued by concerns of oversupply. Bloomberg also reported that the stock value that commodity producers have lost over the past year is almost equal to India's GDP, standing at over $2 trillion. Korea's top 10 business groups added nearly 100 business units through mergers and acquisitions over the past 5 years, with Lotte Group topping the list. According to Jeol.com, that tracks Korea's large enterprises, out of the total 592 companies affiliated with the top 10 conglomerates, 98 were added on through M&As since 2010. The country's fifth largest conglomerate, Lotte Group, was the most active player in the M&A market, adding on 19 units during that period. Hyundai Motor Group also acquired 13 companies, accounting for 26% of the automaker's total arms that have joined since 2010. Experts say that while M&As are a good way for cash-rich conglomerates to expand and diversify their businesses, such deals need to be combined with efforts to foster new growth engines. Now, science has told us that women do generally live longer than men, but new figures from the OECD show that the gender gap in life expectancy here in Korea is far higher than most developed countries. Now, a variety of factors are at play here, but experts say that smoking and drinking are not doing Korean men any favors. Our Son Jung-in has the story.
New data from the OECD show that as of 2013, South Korea's life expectancy at birth stood at 81.8 years, more than 8 years above the OECD average. But if we look at the figures separately, it was a different story for South Korean men. By gender, South Korean men were expected to live until 78.5 years of age, 6.6 years less than women's 85.1 years. Women's life expectancy was the fifth highest among the 34 OECD nations. South Korean men were around the middle in 16th. South Korea's gender gap in life expectancy was the fifth highest, tied with France. The gap was relatively narrow in the Netherlands, New Zealand, the UK, and Iceland, but much larger in Estonia, Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary. Experts say the discrepancy can largely be attributed to higher smoking and alcohol consumption rates among men compared to women. South Korea had the third highest male smoking rate at 36%, but ranked the lowest in women at just over 4%. An official at the Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs pointed out that along with smoking and drinking, other factors like cancer and the high suicide rate probably contributed to lowering life expectancy. He added that South Korean men are more exposed to risks as they tend to have more active social lives than women. Son Jung-in, Business Daily.
We're seeing a growing number of car owners here in Korea, meaning it's also becoming harder for drivers to find a parking spot. With that, many investors are turning their eyes towards a new investment option that they believe could help them make some big bucks in the end. So, what's the new attraction? Our Lee Joo-young has the answer.
You can live without a home, but not without a car. This statement seems to ring true for many in Korea. According to Korea Automobile Manufacturers Association, the domestic car registration was over 20 million units as of last year, which means one household owns at least one or two cars. With the rise in vehicles comes swelling demand for parking, and it's no surprise that many investors are now parking their money in parking lots while taking advantage of the country's low interest rate. Out of this year's parking lots being parceled out nationwide by Korea Land and Housing Corporation, 73 are parking grounds where the land value can range from under $1 million to a few $1 million. What makes these parcels of land more attractive is that up to 30% of the total ground area can be used to build commercial buildings or studios. And the price? It's roughly 20 to 30% cheaper than commercial property, making them more lucrative options for retailers and other investors. But experts warn against investing in overly heated property that comes with a hefty price tag.
When people invest large sums, it's hard to guarantee a reasonable rate of return, which can become a serious problem. This is something to keep in mind.
They also add that investors should closely analyze the accessibility of the location as well as the regional characteristics before sealing the deal. Lee Joo-young, Business Daily.
Today marks the 23rd anniversary of establishing diplomatic ties between Korea and China. And since ties were established, the economic partnership between the two has grown immensely. China today is Korea's biggest economic partner, especially on the trade front. And Korean culture is much loved by the Chinese public, with Korea becoming a favorite travel destination for many Chinese tourists. So to take a look at the evolving relationship and influence on the economy, we're now joined by our Kwon Zoa in the studio today. Hello, Zoa.
Hi, Jiyoon.
All right, so much can happen in a span of 23 years, and you might think that a lot of relationship, the ties, could naturally develop over those years, but that's not always true.
That's right, and that's why we could actually say that Korea and the Korea and China Economic Cooperation is a little more special than others. If you compare ties with Japan that have been in place for 5 decades and the U.S., which is even longer at 65 years, so compared to those countries, Seoul and Beijing still have a relatively young relationship. And let me give you a quick rundown of how things have developed over the years. It all started in 1992 when Beijing and Seoul formally established diplomatic ties. That's the early stages of trade and culture exchanges, which began to grow stronger in the late 1990s. Between 2008 and 2012, the two built up their partnership further in various fields such as security, diplomacy, and politics, developing into strategic cooperative partners. In recent years, Korea and China have been focusing a lot on raising the quality of economic cooperation. And more on that in this report.
对，我们家有这个99%的夏天用特别好，可以到里面试一下，到里面看一下。안녕하세요, 패션입니다.
6 out of 7 workers at this Korean cosmetic store in one of Seoul's main shopping districts are actually from China. This is no surprise, considering the number of Chinese tourists has skyrocketed from less than 180,000 in the mid-90s to more than 6.1 million last year.
90% of our customers are Chinese. That's why we mainly hire Chinese or people who can speak the language.
This scene is not unusual to Koreans anymore, as tourist attractions and must-go shopping locations bustle with guests from China. People are now accustomed to hearing about stronger economic ties between Seoul and Beijing and how things have progressed over the years.
한국에 오는 관광객 중에 어떤 나라에서 가장 많이 온다고 생각하세요?
중국이요.
Mit welchem Land glauben Sie, handelt Korea am meisten?
Ich glaube, Korea handelt am meisten mit der Volksrepublik China.
한국이랑 문화 교류가 가장 많은 나라가 어디라고 생각하세요?
중국도 많을 것 같은데.
Korea and China have had a currency swap in place since 2008. They signed a bilateral free trade agreement in 2014, and Seoul joined the Beijing-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank earlier this year. Bilateral trade has jumped by 36.9 times since establishing ties in 1992. Direct investment has soared, especially from China. When it comes to offshore investment in Korea's markets, Chinese investors make up almost 32% in equities and over 46% in bonds. Today, China has developed into the world's #2 economy. Korea has also been a beneficiary of such rapid expansion from its neighboring country, but with growth going downhill recently, it's been dealing a blow to Korea's trade numbers. Outbound shipments to China account for a quarter of Korea's exports.
Around 80% of exports from Korea to China are intermediate goods. But since 2008, there has been less focus on those goods from China's side due to policy changes, and that has led to a change in China's importing structure.
Most experts say there is no way to reduce dependency on China, and that there is not enough demand for Korea's exports elsewhere. That's why some believe improving Korea's industrial competitiveness is the only solution. That's a task that's not seen as easy, as that competitiveness has been losing steam, especially with China now being one of Korea's main rivals in many key exports. According to one study, Korea's competitiveness in steel and IT exports from the years 2000 to 2013 showed improvements, while China stepped up its performance in those 2 fields plus 3 others.
All right, so the key would be to raise competitiveness in dealing with negative effects stemming from China's slow growth. In other words, we should find ways to improve the quality of our exports.
Exactly, and that would require more investment in research and development, and especially to create new growth engines. And Yoon, just last week we were talking about the importance of boosting the service sector as well. So that's what it's about too. And experts say that to target China's domestic market, we have to come up with some high quality and high value service.
Which could be?
Like IT and finance, which includes e-commerce, but also fields related to the Korean wave to capitalize on the popularity of K-pop and K-dramas. But Yoon, I have to mention that there are also other suggestions which rather than putting a stronger emphasis on the Chinese market. So let's hear what an analyst had to say about this.
The U.S. and Japan remain important trade partners, with around 10% of Korea's exports shipped to those regions. And there are mega trade pacts and negotiations that include those nations, like the KoreaChina-Japan FTA, the TPP, and RCEP. So, while maintaining its dependence on China, Korea should branch out to work with other parties and create a broader spectrum.
All right, so what he's saying is that while China will remain important, the risks won't be going away anytime soon, meaning that maybe try turning to other markets as well.
Exactly. And, you know, there is this saying that if the Chinese economy coughs, Korea catches a cold, right? And but the good thing is that not all are too worried about the state of China's growth because some forecast that if Beijing gets through the current difficulties, even better days could be ahead for China. And in line with that, Korea as well.
All right, let's strongly hope for that. Thank you so much for coming in today, Soa.
My pleasure.
And that wraps it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time, same place, so don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching and have a great start to your week, everyone.